In a new drama for the dark evenings, meet a man of mystery.
Albert Campion, born May the 20th, 1900. Name known to be a pseudonym, education privileged, embarked on adventurous career, 1929. Justice neatly executed.
And it's just these attributes and some strange goings-on that lead Albert Campion to his first case.
When they brought in the body this morning, I saw her face. I'll swear she died of fright. And there's something else.
Yes.
Will Tiffin told me. When he found the body here, she wasn't lying where she'd fallen. She was lying stiff and straight. Her hands folded. Her eyes closed. Will said she'd been laid out as a corpse.
Campion comes to BBC1 tomorrow at 8:35.
BBC Two's own investigator Saturday Night Clive James is about to put the current worldwide changes in televisions into global perspective at the start of his new series. Here on One, 2 films for late night Saturday. In 15 minutes, Westworld, an exciting thriller about a resort which offers its clients anything they want and where fantasy and the robots are in danger of taking over. Yul Brynner, Richard Benjamin and James Brolin star. Then it's time for the return of the soldier, shell-shocked, missing the last 20 years because of amnesia, and intent on reliving his first love affair with a woman who is now married. Alan Bates returns as the soldier at 11:20 to Glenda Jackson and Julie Christie. But now on BBC One, it's time for the news and sport with Michael Buerk and David Icke. The time, 9:40.
President George Bush has called an emergency meeting with leaders of Congress to cut the United States' huge budget deficit. After only 1 day in the White House, he started using what he calls the firm hand of the presidency. And cricket in confusion tonight as the courts are brought in to prevent a ban on players going to South Africa. Good evening. George Bush started his first full day as America's president by showing tourists round the White House. But before it's come to an end, he started tackling his biggest problems. He's called a meeting with leaders of Congress to find ways to cut America's huge budget deficit, so large it threatens the economies of Britain and Europe as well as the United States. He's also responding to a message from Mr. Gorbachev to work for world peace. All part, Mr. Bush says, of what will be presidency with a firm hand. Martin Bell reports on Mr. Bush and his celebratory first day in the White House.
It was not a time for half measures. That was the entire Mormon Tabernacle Choir last night serenading the new president, and that was Mr. Bush attending the first of 10 inaugural balls, and he no Fred Astaire.
A lousy dancer trying to dance his first dance with the First Lady. And here we go. Make it slow. You guys dance.
Today, the White House was under its new management, a crowd of ordinary Americans outside, and the president there at the door.
And welcome you to the People's House. Thank you all very much.
Later, he was to worry aloud about how he's going to establish his new partnership with Congress. But for the moment, he led some of the luckier visitors round the White House, where he admitted that he himself had got lost the night before. And he read aloud a note that he found from his predecessor.
Do not let the turkeys get you down. I don't know who he's speaking about there.
Wave? Dunker would even wave at a funeral. We're not this a serious occasion, you know.
Afterwards, there was a family photograph on the South Lawn. And it's a big family. There were 23 of them staying with him last night. As in the Kennedy years, there are children at the White House, grandchildren in George Bush's case, and this has the mark of a much less formal presidency.
Here, the Home Secretary has rejected criticism of his handling of the Viraj Mendez deportation. Mr. Hurd told Conservatives in Oxfordshire that strict immigration controls are essential, combined with vigorous opposition to discrimination.
Viraj Mendez landed in Sri Lanka complaining of horrendous treatment and accusing the British government of racist attitudes. He told journalists in Colombo that he still feared persecution or death and that the British government would be morally responsible for what might happen.
There is a lot of danger in Sri Lanka for anybody who's opposed to the government and also supports the Tamil struggle for independence.
Stung by criticism from the church and from some MPs, the Home Secretary Douglas Hurd once again rejected the Mendez case for refugee status.
People may be in danger in Sri Lanka. People are in danger in Manchester. I obviously can't guarantee his future safety. What I can say, without fear of contradiction, is that he had not that well-founded fear of persecution, which would enable him to be treated as a refugee.
Mr. Hurd told fellow Conservatives that strict immigration controls had to be enforced to ensure harmonious race relations in Britain. Achieving social peace, he said, depended on ridding society of racial discrimination. But Mr. Hurd's decision to deport Viraj Mendez continues to draw protest. The Sri Lankan High Commission in London was daubed with paint earlier today. 2 people were arrested.
Downing Street has dismissed as absolute nonsense a newspaper report which claims that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are at loggerheads over a possible increase in mortgage tax relief. Mrs Thatcher is said to want the ceiling raised to £35,000 in the budget. She's known to be a stronger supporter of mortgage relief than Mr Lawson. But Number 10 said tonight that the Prime Minister hadn't discussed the issue recently with the Chancellor. Engineers are working through the night, trying to find out why a Boeing 757 jet landed at Heathrow Airport with only one of its engines working properly. The airport was put on full emergency alert as the plane came in this morning.
The British Airways shuttle from Edinburgh had 82 passengers on board. Halfway through the flight, after reporting technical problems, the pilot cut back on the power supply to the left-hand engine. Heathrow was put on full emergency alert, but the aircraft landed safely. British Airways today described the incident as routine. They said the 757 can operate on one engine if necessary. Nevertheless, this is the latest in a series of setbacks for Boeing. Yesterday, the right-hand engine of a Piedmont Airlines Boeing 737 fell off shortly after leaving Chicago. The plane landed safely with no injuries. Only the day before, a wing panel fell off an Eastern Airlines 757. Boeing has also delayed delivery of its new 747-400 series jumbos, the world's largest commercial aircraft. This follows what are described as production difficulties. 2 weeks ago, a Boeing 737 crashed onto the M1 at Kegworth in Leicestershire. Tonight, the death toll from that disaster rose to 45, with the death of a man from Belfast who'd been in hospital since the crash.
A court summons has been issued to try to stop the international cricket authorities from suspending players who go to South Africa. The International Cricket Conference was expected to confirm a 4-year ban on Monday during a meeting at Lord's. But Norris McWhirter, chairman of the Freedom Association, obtained the summons under the Theft Act on the grounds that a ban would affect an individual's professional rights. The summons against the ICC Secretary, Colonel John Stevenson, was granted this morning at Horseferry Road Magistrates Court in London.
The Freedom Association say international attempts to stop England cricketers from playing or coaching in South Africa is not cricket. They insist that individuals should be allowed to practice their profession where they choose, and they accuse the International Cricket Conference of trying to blackmail players.
This means that on Monday they've really got to consider whether they can go ahead with the resolutions. And this, I would have thought that they couldn't, because the Secretary's got to present himself at the court on the 20th of March to answer the charges, and if those charges are found to be sustainable, there would be a trial before judge and jury in a county court.
The Secretary of the International Cricket Conference, Colonel Stevenson, said he received the summons here at Lord's today. It had taken him by surprise. There'd been no formal discussion of it, and it was now in the hands of their lawyers.
Mr McWhirter's summons has bowled a googly at the English cricket authorities. They've traditionally supported individual rights to play or coach in South Africa, but they're under intense pressure from black countries to put a stop to it. The summons can only exacerbate the English dilemma when the International Conference meets at Lord's on Monday to consider proposals for suspending players. The Freedom Association intend to add further pressure by seeking a High Court injunction against the ICC.
And now on the opening day of Rugby Union's Five Nations Championship, here with the sports news is David Icke.
Scotland exposed the problems besetting Welsh rugby with an emphatic victory at Murrayfield. They beat last year's winners of the Triple Crown by 23 points to 7. Football, the First Division leaders Arsenal had a scare against one of the bottom clubs, Sheffield Wednesday. Imre Varadi gave Wednesday the lead at Highbury, and Arsenal had an anxious wait for Paul Merson's equaliser. David Speedy maintained Coventry's challenge with the winner in the 2-1 victory over Wimbledon. Manchester United's young team have been attracting attention, and at West Ham today they showed why. Rob Bonnet was there.
Manchester United's young, little-known faces. The Fergie Babes, as they've been called, have been suddenly required to bear the full weight of the Old Trafford traditions. The presence of the club's most eminent director, once a Busby Babe, constantly reminds of a glorious past. His praise is fulsome.
They've been brilliant, the little lads. They've gone into situations where you would expect hardened professionals to suffer, you know, but they've enjoyed it, and good luck to them.
But it was the senior players who largely shaped this match. First, Bruce's trip on Rosinia, inside the area, according to the referee. Brady had missed on Wednesday, not today. Robson, his opposite number, was back from injury, an unwelcome sight for McKnight in the West Ham goal, as was Strachan. United's first Upton Park win in 21 years was on its way. In the second half, Manchester were doubly fortunate to take the lead. Martin looked offside and then received the luck his director had wished on him. But United's third conclusive goal was pure quality. Strachan's kick found Bruce, he set up McClare. As West Ham's league season crumbles, United gain points on the leaders. Yet, in January, all the issues are still alive. West Ham 1, Manchester United 3.
John Aldridge and Ian Rush both scored for Liverpool in the 2-0 win over Southampton, and Brian Clough's controversial week ended with a standing ovation from the crowd and a 4-0 win for Nottingham Forest over Aston Villa. Arsenal are now 6 points clear of Norwich, who play Millwall tomorrow, Forest off 5th. In the second division, Sergei Baltacha became the first Soviet player to play in the league, and he scored as Ipswich beat Stoke 5-1. In Scotland, Ali McCoist was among the scorers as Rangers beat Dundee 3-1, and they extend their lead to 2 points over Dundee United, who drew with Hearts. Celtic won 3-1 at Hibernian, while Aberdeen won 2-0 at Motherwell. Britain's figure skating champion Joanne Conway has failed to win a medal at the European Championships in Birmingham. 17-year-old Joanne finished 6th. She was lying second when she took part in the free skating event this afternoon, but once again during a major championship, her nerves affected her performance. The women's gold medal was won by Claudia Leisner of West Germany.
The French government are going ahead with the construction of an airport in Antarctica, directly across the breeding grounds of 75,000 penguins. The French say they need an airlink to service their research station. They brought in bulldozers to build a causeway across 6 islands. But the environmental group Greenpeace claim that important nesting sites are being destroyed through blasting, and numbers are said to be dwindling. They've accused the French of breaking an international treaty which forbids the destruction of wildlife in Antarctica. And tonight's main story again. 1 day into his presidency, George Bush has called for an emergency session with congressional leaders to discuss America's budget crisis. Now to look at some of tomorrow's front pages. The Mail on Sunday says, "Find this killer," and claims that one of the world's most wanted terrorists is leading a double life in Sweden. The Sunday Telegraph reports on a row over clinics involved in a kidneys for sale controversy. And The Observer gives details of a poll showing Tory supporters turning against Nigel Lawson's interest rates policy. Plenty of reading there. From the newsroom, good night.
Tabloids need taming with a new law to protect our right to privacy, to keep the gutter press at bay. So say the authors of a new bill that's now before Parliament. But is their crusade a people's cause or a charter for the rich and famous? And how do you safeguard private lives without destroying public freedoms? That's On the Record tomorrow at 1 o'clock on BBC1.
Hello to you. I think you're going to be very lucky if you miss it tonight. A fairly widespread frost, icy roads, and not only ice on the roads, but probably on the pavements as well. I think it's only going to be around some of the coastal areas that are going to see temperatures a few degrees above freezing. So basically over the whole of the country, a frost, icy patches. So do take care, not only tonight, but at first tomorrow morning. So most of the country clear, though there will be one or two wintry showers coming into northern and eastern Scotland, perhaps some patchy cloud down the eastern coast of England, and later in the night we'll find thicker cloud coming into Western Ireland. Most of it will start dry and quite sunny tomorrow. The rain out here to the west, but it won't take long before that rain begins to push into Western Ireland, getting into Western Scotland, and perhaps by evening time getting into West Wales and perhaps even into southwestern parts of England. So tomorrow for the detail, lots of sunshine around, but a fairly crisp, frosty start. The clouds thickening up all the time across Ireland, and that rain getting into much of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, West Wales, and perhaps eventually some patchy rain getting into the southwest. The winds fairly light, but all the time they will be picking up with gale force winds, perhaps in Western Scotland later in the day. The temperatures down to the south around about 9, elsewhere a little bit on the cold side.
Just when you thought it was safe to come in out of the cold, BBC1 comes up with this.
Suppose we told you the BBC was going to bring back the same programme in its 16th year, put it in the same slot on Sunday nights, on the same channel, BBC1, with the same team and exactly the same mixture of jokes and investigations and films. What would you say?
Esther sued for £1.5 million.
That's life.
It certainly is. Tomorrow at 9:30.
Life for the returning soldier often can be difficult, and for Alan Bates in our film at 11:20 there's the added problem of partial amnesia. He doesn't remember his wife, just his first love, who is now married herself. There's an all-star cast in the story of Rebecca West, Return of the Soldier. And our first film highlights the dangers of getting away from it all, especially when there's no such thing as a perfect world, and robotically speaking, Yul Brynner is the star of this thriller, set in Westworld.